Jesus had gone around in Galilee, and on one particular occasion was confronted by a Roman centurion, a bad dude, who said, "Would you come and heal my servant?" Jesus said, "I'm coming right there." He said, "Don't come, just say the word. You've got the authority, say the word." Jesus said the word, the servant was raised, and Jesus said, "I haven't found faith like this in Israel," which was the reverse of what everybody else thought. Faith exists in Israel. We know God. Out there are sinners, they're the Gentiles. Now we have a Gentile coming who expresses faith. I know who you are. I know how it works. Just say the word. And Jesus said, the faith lives in the Gentiles. I haven't found it in Israel. Now, those are fighting words, especially if you're committed to the idea that all we got to do is get Israel to straighten up and fly right, and God will reestablish the kingdom and get rid of those Romans. Then Jesus raised somebody from the dead, and the people started to say, "There's a great prophet here." A religious movement, therefore, called the Pharisees, who were concerned about Israel and about the faith of Israel and separating Israel from the Gentiles, who now hear that there's a prophet among them who's saying the opposite. One named Simon said, "We're having this guy to dinner. I'm calling my friends. We're going to have a little chat." And so one of the Pharisees asked him over for a meal. No pressure. And he went to the Pharisee's house and sat down at the dinner table. Now, you need to understand that if this is a dinner table, a guest table in Jesus' time, part of you is sitting, part of you is lying down. You're sort of propped up, and the rest of you, your legs in particular, are stretched out, which to me is a good way to get ketchup on your shirt. But that's the way they had dinner, and it would be sort of spokes in a wheel so that you could look at one another, which is why at the Last Supper, John could just lean over and recline his head on Jesus' chest, because they're that close. So we're talking about some intimate conversation, and the heads are close to the center of the table where the food is, so the conversation can get intense. You need to also understand that we're in a hot place. We don't know from doors or windows or walls. Anybody ever been to a place like that? I went to a hotel in Bali, and you just walked in. There was no front door. There were no walls. You just walked in. Well, a house is something like this here, which means that if there's anything going on, everybody shows up. So there's this conversation going on. I'm sure the Pharisees want others to hear. And a whole bunch of people spread around, which means that just then a woman of the village, the town harlot, having learned that Jesus was a guest at the home of the Pharisee, came with a bottle of very expensive perfume and stood at his feet. Like everybody else, I suppose, but she in particular shows up. The attribution of harlot to her does not actually occur in this, but it occurs in the other three Gospels, and would appear to be a way of saying that she is, as it actually says, a notorious sinner. And I almost see that in brackets. What does it mean to be a notorious sinner? And I also ask a question, in this day, how many ways are there for a woman to be a notorious sinner? So, the status of the woman is expressed in this by her activity. So she approaches Jesus and stands at his feet, which means that she's wedged in between his feet and the feet of the man next to her. To say that she is obvious and that this is an awkward situation would be an understatement. And the narrative slows down enough to say, as though everybody needed to hear this and be exposed to exactly the way it goes, she stood at his feet weeping, raining tears on his feet, and letting down her hair, which is quite frankly sexual activity. She dried his feet, kissed his feet, and anointed them with the perfume. Part of me is saying, Jesus, is it time to press pause on this video? Because it is extraordinarily awkward. This is extraordinarily intimate behavior. And it would appear that it is coming from someone whose behavior otherwise is well known. So why are you letting this run? Which is the question that is asked otherwise. There are all kinds of questions that are associated with this that don't get answered. Does she know Jesus? Does he know her? Have they had encounters before? Is this her first encounter? I don't know. I wish I did. There is one thing I do know that qualifies this for me completely, and those are the tears. In anything that I understand, and I'm no expert about prostitution, the body's given, not the heart. That's the deal. That's the exchange. I want what I want, and then I want to leave you. Don't attach yourself to me, I'm going. That would be the man's perspective on things. So where do the tears come from? And why are they the things that fall first? Why does she lavish them on him? Why is this an exposure of her heart? What happened to this woman to take this risk? This woman who knows what to do with the body, does this with this body and sheds these tears on these feet in this situation. This isn't what it looks like. When the Pharisee who'd invited him saw this, he said to himself, if this man was the prophet, aha, they said he was a prophet, so he raised somebody from the dead. That's the question. Are you a prophet? I want to qualify you as a prophet. If you're a prophet, maybe I can add you to my supporters. I need political help. If you're not, I want to write you off. But that's as far as we get with this. This is an intellectual discussion. Do you understand? And I want you to tip your hat. Do one thing wrong so we can nail you on Twitter. Which means, by the way, also that this woman in this encounter to that Pharisee is collateral damage. Who cares what happens to her? If this man was a prophet, I thought he was, he would have known what kind of woman this is who is falling over him. And Simon tips his hand. In my kingdom, these kind of people do not belong. In my kingdom, we keep ourselves clean. Ever encountered religion like that? And Jesus said to him, Simon, I have something to tell you. Now, up until this point, the narrator has said that Simon has said to himself. In other words, it's an inward conversation. This man's no prophet. How does Jesus know it's time to tell him a story? Simon, I have something to tell you. Okay, tell me. 2 men were in debt to a banker. One owed 500 silver pieces, the other 50. Neither of them could pay up, and so the banker canceled both debts. Which of the two would be more grateful? Common situation in Jesus' day, usually payment for taxes. So the way you go is tax them high so they borrow high, so eventually you hold the mortgage on everything. To be forgiven was not unheard of, but it was highly unusual. I just heard when I was coming back from Saskatoon this week that a famous American television personality got together $15 million and is in the process of forgiving the medical debt of selected American people who have discovered that their insurer doesn't cover them and wind up in one day or 1 month $100,000, $200,000, $300,000 in debt, which they can never pay, and their lives are over economically, and he's simply writing checks. Now, I bet he's going to get letters and emails. But it happens. Then the question is, which of the two, as Jesus describes them, would be more grateful? Part of me wants to say, I have not noticed a great deal of gratefulness in my culture. For when anybody does this, it's it's about time. Somebody did something, and it reminds me that I live in a culture of victimhood in which there are no sinners. My problems are somebody else's fault. But no. Which of the two would be more grateful? Stops me cold and says, would you have been grateful at all, Peter? Good question. And Simon answered, I suppose the one who was forgiven the most. Most debt, most forgiveness, most love. Seems like a no-brainer. That's right, said Jesus. Then turning to the woman, but speaking to Simon, he said, do you see this woman? Is there anybody in that room who doesn't see that woman? She walked in from the outside. She's standing there, kneeling, weeping, making noise, tears, the smell of the ointment, her hair unwound, wiping his feet. Is there anybody who doesn't see this woman? Yeah, Jesus asked him, do you see this woman? I just attended the General Assembly of the denomination of my ordination. One of the things the denomination is doing is working with people stuck in human trafficking. As an emblem of the work that's being done, there were 5 portraits that were out there, photo portraits. They were of women who had been released from sex trafficking in Canada. They were beautiful portraits, and they all had a commonality to them. All of them portrayed these women in black. All of them portrayed them basically from the waist up. All of them made their faces prominent. One in particular struck me because she was the only one wearing a tank top, quite modest, but she wore the tank top quite clearly because she was tattooed over every inch of her body. And I read the story of her work in a tattoo parlor, which led to a cocaine addiction, which led to human trafficking. And she spent decades in prostitution and came to faith in Jesus Christ and was transformed so that now she helps other women who are caught in the sex trade. And I went away from that, but I forgot her name. The only thing I remembered from the portrait was that she worked with AIDS in South Saskatchewan. I wonder, my son-in-law heads up, I think he heads that organization, AIDS, Southern Saskatchewan. I'm going straight to their home this weekend. I'll ask them. I went to their home. I sat at the table. I said, I saw this picture. I saw this woman. I forget her name. And I saw the serene face of a soul set free in the midst of a context of tattoos. Oh, they said, Beatrice. Yeah, Beatrice. Do you see this woman? What do you see? The thing that gets me about this story from start to finish is she never has a name. What do you see? I see a victim. No, I see Beatrice. Somebody with a name. Somebody whose life has been reconstituted. Somebody with that kind of self-possession within her own self who exudes the kind of comfort that makes me comfortable. Beatrice was her name. Do you see this woman? That's a question we need to ask ourselves within our culture. Do you see this woman? Simon, I came to your home. You provided no water to my feet. And by the way, he's talking to Simon, but he's looking right at her because she knows she did. She rained tears on my feet and dried them with her hair. You gave me no greeting, but from the time I arrived, she hasn't quit kissing my feet. That's quite a greeting. You provided nothing for freshening up, but she has soothed my feet with perfume. You would do that sort of thing if the guest was a guest of honor. Quite clearly, Jesus isn't. Impressive, isn't it? You're sort of, what would you say? Oh, I'm sorry, I'll get to serve it right away. Too late. Too late. She was forgiven many, many sins, and so she is very, very grateful. If the forgiveness is minimal, the gratitude is minimal. Ouch. What just happened here? A woman whose identity and history is a complete mystery to us, except for a few little clues, walked in and lavished hospitality on Jesus. Jesus of Nazareth, at great risk to herself, open, exposed, criticized, of course, she still did it. Lavished love, that was the only thing she did. She didn't confess faith. I don't see her being baptized. She couldn't recite the Beatitudes. I don't know anything else about her except that she walked into Jesus Christ and lavished her love upon him. And he said, out of his knowledge of her, I'll have to take his word for it, great forgiveness, great love. She doesn't mind showing anybody either. I sit down there and I think, just as someone said a while ago, yeah, great forgiveness. I got that part. I'm not certain I know how to love this lavishly. I'm not certain I got this. If I'm forgiven that much, where's the love? Because, with all due respect to Tina Turner, love's got everything to do with it. And it's the first thing, not the last thing. And it's not an optional extra. And this seemed to flow out of her. I have to squeeze it on myself like it was out of a tube. I need that same grace. And then he spoke to her. I forgive your sins. I love this because nobody else is going to say a word. Okay? Nobody else is going to say a word. And he's looking at her. It's like the woman who was taken in adultery, dumped in front of Jesus, nameless again. What are we going to do to her? It says to stone her. And after he said, sure, the one that's sinless among you, cast the first stone. Then he looks at her and says, your sins are forgiven. And every other accuser is banished. I forgive your sins. What are her sins? I don't know. Are her sins sexual? I don't know. St. Augustine slept with everybody in North Africa, but when it came time to be convicted for his sins, he got convicted because he stole fruit as a kid, which was the time when he transgressed against his own soul and knew he'd broken fellowship with God. What good is our list of sins in order of priority? When was the moment you broke fellowship with God and walked out alone and solitary? Who knows what this woman's sins are and what business is in mine? What I do know is that she had the kind of faith that automatically shows love. And he said to her, your sins are forgiven. And then they said, who does he think he is, forgiving sins? Hence the title for my sermon, I'm the king. This is my kingdom, my way. That's your kingdom, your way. In my kingdom, I'm the king. And I have power on earth to forgive sins. Do you believe in Jesus Christ? Does that show itself in love? Or we still try to work it through? Because the one who truly knows him manifests that through love. This text of Scripture has given me a hard time. He ignored them. He ignored them, a whole cluster of Pharisees, and said to the woman, your faith has saved you. Go in peace. At the same General Assembly that I attended this week, I saw a picture. It's a picture of a woman in her 80s in her little retirement home, bowed in prayer, her hands stretched across, and holding the hand of a man, I would say in his 30s, who is bowing his head in prayer with her. Let me tell you a story. She was enjoying her life in retirement, and the mother of the president of that same denomination, when a man broke in, stole her purse, stole her keys, stole her car, and wrecked it on the way out. He was high in the process. The police caught him. They brought her stuff back, the keys in the purse, and insurance fixed the car. And she said to her son, who is also a minister, but they gave me back $35 and I only had $25. I owe them $10. And at the time, the man said, Mom, let it go. we'll just pray for him. She prayed for him. She said, he's coming to court. Yeah, I want to go. They went to court. This late 80-year-old woman pled for a light sentence. While this guy is sitting there, and the judge said at that point, I hate it when you Christians show up. You make my job hard. Because everything this guy did, I could drop a piano on him, but not when you show up. So he adjusted the sentence and looked at the accused and said, I hope you know what you're getting, and I hope you're thankful. Which is as far, by the way, as this world's law can go. She was operating by another one. And they got in touch with the chaplain of the prison to which he was sent. And the chaplain went to work, and that man came to faith in Jesus Christ and was baptized. And the picture was a picture of him returning to the woman he'd victimized to get his $10 back. And to get a sister and a mother he never had, perhaps. And to join hands in prayer. And hear a blessing where you might have got cursing. Jesus says to us, that's my kind of kingdom. It's my kind of kingdom, and people come in, but let me tell you, love is a currency in this kingdom. If you're coming in, you're going to love. It's not just me and Jesus, it's me and Jesus and her. It's me and Jesus and him. It's me and Jesus and them. We're in this together. And it ends, this passage. I love this. He continued to go out and preach. He took the 12 disciples with him. And from this point on, note this, a whole company of women who'd been healed of illnesses and evil afflictions followed with them. When these women come, all the men say, Lord, women are trouble. They're sexual trouble. That's what their culture believed. And Jesus said, no, your heart, sir, is sexual trouble. The women stay. You deal with it. That's what he said. And they become a kind of a road company to take care of all the physical stuff that goes on out of their own resources. Wow. Incredible. As if till Luke said, the game's changed. Get it straight. Gender relations are different. This woman walks into the kingdom for a lavish love of God, and her sins are forgiven. There's a whole lot of people still outside looking in. I hope you're not one of them. I want to be one of the ones inside who loves lavishly and is forgiven deeply. Because it's his kingdom from start to finish.